Welcome back, everybody. It is Monday. The stock market is open, and that means it's time to talk about college football teams that I'm buying in on and selling off after an amazing week 8. So let's go ahead, let's dive right in and get started with this week's edition of the college football stock market. As always, we start by taking a look back at what I did last week, who I bought, sold, and held on. Teams I bought onto were Iowa State, who had a bye, Oklahoma State. They went on the road, they beat West Virginia, and I bought in on Liberty. They remained undefeated this past week. I sold on USC. They lose at home to Utah. I sold on Wake Forest. They had a last second miracle victory over Pitt at home, and Colorado had a bye. Teams I held on were Toledo and Arizona. Arizona has a bye. Toledo with a huge win at Miami of Ohio. They control their destiny in the MAC West. I didn't think Toledo was going to fall apart or anything like that, but they've been playing a lot of games very close lately, and Saturday was another example of that. And that can turn around and bite you the longer you go into the season. So that's why I put the hold on them. So let's go ahead and look at the teams I'm looking at for this week, buying and selling. I'm not going to put a hold on anybody this week, and I imagine as the season continues to wind down, there'll be less and less holds, just because I feel like we have a clearer picture at this point of what teams are. We're going to start on the selling side. I am selling off on Georgia Tech. A few weeks ago, they beat Miami. They looked poised. That's a momentum building win. You go on the road, you get basically a second chance in that game. Miami just had to kneel the ball, and that game was over. They get a second chance. They throw up a hail mary. They win. That's supposed to boost you and give you momentum going forward through the rest of your schedule. They needed three more wins to get past that. Boston College was a very winnable game. They have that at home. Boston College rolls them 38-23. And now you look at their upcoming schedule too. Uh, Home against UNC, who's coming off of a loss to Virginia, who they also play on the road the week after that. But hosting UNC, that's going to be a very pissed off UNC team. I don't expect them to lose that game. Like I said, at Virginia, and then at Clemson. I don't care how good or bad Clemson is. Georgia Tech is not a team that's going to go into Death Valley and win that football game. And then they're going to host Syracuse, and then the week after that, they play Georgia. I honestly don't see 3 wins ahead for them. It's gonna be very difficult. And so a team of again, a few weeks ago, and if you look back at that Bowling Green game, again, Bowling Green is not a very good team in the MAC. And that's a game Georgia Tech should absolutely win, and they lose 38-27 at home as well. So this goes from a team that looked like, "Hey, we're just gonna build off this Miami win, and we're gonna put together a solid bowl resume and get to a bowl game this year and continue building going forward," to now all of a sudden, I don't think you're making a bowl game. And such such a far fall from where they started the season. They did lose to Louisville in week 1, but we've seen how good Louisville is, and Georgia Tech was up for most of that game. They kind of fell apart late. It's gonna be a tough road for Georgia Tech the rest of the season, and I just don't see a bowl game in their future. On the flip side of this past week's game, I'm gonna buy into Boston College. A few weeks ago, we thought this team was dead in the water. There was no way they're making a bowl game. They lost to Northern Illinois to start the season, and then they barely beat Holy Cross. And then they go on the road to Louisville. They get smacked 56-28. They've rattled off 3 straight wins since that. And you look at their upcoming schedule, I can absolutely see it at least 2 wins. UConn is a feisty team. They're going to give Boston College a close game, but should be a game Boston College wins, especially with it being at home. Then they're at Syracuse. Syracuse has had their ups and downs this season. Who knows what happens with Boston College in that game? Virginia Tech at home. I feel like that's going to be a coin flip game. Virginia Tech is trending upwards, but so is Boston College. And with that game being at home, again, might give them a slight edge. And then they're at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is what I believe one of the worst teams in the ACC. I think the second worst team right now. Originally, I had Boston College in that conversation, and now with their play the past couple weeks, I think they're above that. And then the week after that, they play Miami at home. So definitely a schedule ahead where they can get 2 games and into a bowl game. Might save Jeff Hafley's job. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But far, far improved from what we saw at the beginning of the season and what our expectations were after just the first couple of weeks. Let's go back and we're going to look at another team I'm buying. Speaking of losing to Northern Illinois in week 1, I'm going to buy into Northern Illinois. Last year, this was a very seasoned roster. They looked poised to win or compete for the MAC, and then injuries just completely derailed their season. They had 1 win the entire year. And then there's a lot of uncertainty coming back. Like, yeah, you had injury issues and a lot of problems, but how much did that really affect you? Um, Then they go out, they lose to an FCS school. They have a very sluggish start to the year. They're sitting at 1-4. And then they go on the road at Akron. Excuse me, let me back up. They go on the road at Toledo. Again, Toledo is a class in the MAC right now, defending MAC champions. They lose that game by only 2 points. They were in that the entire time. They had a chance to win. And then they go on the road at Akron, a nice bounce back for them. Akron, again, one of the worst teams, beat them 55-14. Then they have Ohio, who I think is the best team in the East right now, or at least absolutely in that conversation. And they beat them by 10, 23-13. And then they have Eastern Illinois come to town this past week. Eastern Illinois was a preseason favorite for a lot of teams or a lot of people in the MAC, a lot of returning talent. They go to that bowl game last year. They go to Eastern or Northern Illinois, excuse me, and Northern Illinois beats them 20-13 in a great back and forth, dogfight game. But nonetheless, Northern Illinois pulls it out. And now looking at their upcoming schedule, I'm not just thinking bowl game. I'm thinking, if Toledo slips and they lose a game or even two, again with that playing everybody really close, Northern Illinois is right there, especially with this upcoming schedule at Central Michigan, pretty bad team, Ball State, Western Michigan, and Kent State all I think for the bottom tier teams in the MAC. Right there with Akron. This is a very good Northern Illinois team. Definitely have a bowl game in their future, and if some chaos happens in front of them, they are absolutely in contention to not just go to the MAC championship, but I think if whoever comes out of the West is going to be the MAC champion this season. Um, so I'm loving what I'm seeing out of Northern Illinois here the past couple weeks, and I'm excited for their future ahead the rest of the season. Back to the selling side. I sold on Texas Tech a couple weeks ago, but that was more so in terms of possibly winning the Big 12. I had very high expectations for them this season, as I feel like a lot of other people did as well. Um, to start the season, obviously, it didn't look like that was the case, but now I'm selling on them again in terms of I don't know if they can make a bowl game. Sitting at 3-5, it looked like they had turned their season around and they were getting some spark. Obviously, they lost their starting quarterback Tyler Shuck in that game at West Virginia, but then everybody's concerned about what their offense is going to look like. They go out the next 2 weeks, they put up 49 and 39 points respectively. They looked pretty good on the offensive side of the ball. So a lot of hype around this team again. Again, with everything in front of them, who knows what happens? Maybe they can, fall backwards into the Big 12 title game. And then they go and they host Kansas State at home and they lose at 38-21. Was never really that close. Kansas State controlled that game the entire way. And then this week they go to BYU. BYU is coming off an ugly loss to TCU. Could really damage their motivation for this game and all the momentum they had. And then they just steamrolled Texas. This game again was not really close at all. I think it was 27-7 for the most part. And then Texas Tech had a late touchdown to make it 27-14. But devastating loss there for Texas. And again, let's look at this upcoming schedule. They have 4 games left. They need to win 3. They need to go 3-1 at least to make a bowl game. Um, they have TCU to come to town. I feel like that's a coin flip game. TCU just got steamrolled by Kansas State this past week. They are a very hot and cold team. Then they're at Kansas. Kansas is still a very good football team. I understand they lost, um, you know, last week to Oklahoma State. I still believe in Kansas, and they're a pretty good football team. Then they have UCF coming to town. UCF is not very good ever since that Baylor loss, and they continue to spiral. But they put up a hell of a fight against Oklahoma this past week, so they have absolutely the tools and the potential to be a very good football team. They just haven't been able to play like it the past couple weeks. So Texas Tech has to host them, and then they go on the road to number 7 Texas. All the comments and everything in the offseason from the Big 12 commissioner about, "Oh, you need to go down to Austin and beat them and, keep them out of the Big 12 championship game," and all this other stuff. It's fuel to the fire, and it's gonna be difficult for Texas Tech to find 3 wins the rest of the season. And again, this is just mainly because of injuries and everything that's happened. Uh, Absolutely don't need to be looking for a reason to fire their head coach. I still think he's one of the best head coaches out there. It's just really just a sophomore slump for him, unfortunately, and he comes at a very bad time. But so I'm going to sell in Texas Tech for now. I think it's difficult to find 3 wins here for them to make a bowl game. Let's get back to the buying side, and we're going to look at SMU. SMU does not play Tulane. Their toughest test that lies ahead is at Memphis, the next to last game, and then after that they play Navy. They play 3 very not good, or at least not great American teams. They're 5-2. Those 2 losses are to Big 12 teams, Oklahoma and TCU. Both of them are on the road. The TCU one they did not look very good in, but the Oklahoma game, they looked pretty good. And then they beat Charlotte at home, and then 2, road wins at Eastern Carolina and Temple, 55 to nothing. We watched that game on Friday, and it was just a shellacking. So SMU is building momentum as they continue to go, and like I said, pretty favorable schedule ahead for them. Tulsa at home, at Rice, home against North Texas, who gave Tulane a hell of a fight this past weekend after being down 28 to 27, I want to say. It might have even been 28 nothing. They stormed back, tied it at 28, and then Tulane gets a late touchdown to win 35-28. And then at Memphis, which I think is going to be the showdown to whoever's going to make it to face Tulane in the American title game. Memphis looking for a rematch. SMU hoping to make it there. And then, like I said, after that, they're playing Navy at home. So pretty favorable schedule ahead, and they might be the team that keeps Tulane. Depending on how things shake out and what happens in the American title game, who makes it out of Memphis or SMU. But SMU absolutely has the team and the defense, especially to give Tulane a lot of problems, and they might keep Tulane out of that New Year's Six bowl for the Group of Five conference. But I really like what SMU is doing the last couple of weeks, and I'm looking ahead at that schedule, and I'm just liking it more and more. So SMU, I'm really high on right now. Last team we're going to look at is Marshall. Um, Marshall started the season very well, had a win over a Power Five team in Virginia Tech at home. Then they started off their conference 1-0. They beat Old Dominion 41-35. Then they go on the road at NC State. NC State started their backup quarterback. They benched Brandon Armstrong. It was a shootout. It was a great game, 48-41. Nothing to hang your head about. You still have your whole season ahead of you in terms of the Sun Belt. You've looked very strong to start the season. Everything is out there for you still. Then they go on the road at Georgia State, who is another very good Sun Belt team. They lose that game 41-24. And then they host James Madison this past week. The score says 20-9. It might as well have been 20 to nothing. They had negative rushing yards in that game. The only points the only points Marshall scored was a safety and a punt return touchdown. The offense was gone. And I understand your starting running back was benched or not benched. He was hurt. Um, but negative rushing yards is not a very good statistic you want to see. Unable to move the ball the entire night. Obviously, the offense scored no points. Defense had a fit too with James Madison. And then you look at their upcoming schedule. They need 2 wins at least to make a bowl game. And then so they're at Coastal Carolina and then at App State, 2 very difficult teams to beat on the road. Then they have Georgia Southern, who I think is again one of the top tier teams in the Sun Belt this season. Obviously, James Madison dismantled them a few weeks ago, but I still think they're absolutely competing for the Sun Belt title at this point. And then they're at South Alabama, who's really turned it on the past couple weeks. They just won 55-3 this past week. It's the second time in 3 games they beat somebody 55 to one score. Um, and so that's going to be another very difficult game for Marshall. And Another thing, that kind of worries me about this is how the fans were treating them, during and after the game, especially late in that game, throwing stuff on the field, all this other stuff. The players had to address it in the press conferences. It's just more and more distractions that are getting added to Marshall. I'm actually gonna be at that App State game in a few weeks, and I'll be, documenting, vlogging it and all that stuff. But I'm really concerned for Marshall looking ahead. This is 2 years in a row now. They've had amazingly strong starts to the season and just fizzled out throughout the rest of the year. I really like their head coach. I like this program, but they need to find a way to sustain success throughout the year and not just kind of have an explosive start and then fade off as the rest of the season goes. So, not impossible for them to get 2 wins, but it's a very difficult road ahead with this upcoming schedule. And if I'm Marshall too, my coming into this year with everything that you had returning how last year went, you beat Notre Dame on the road. Again, all these expectations around you. Um, just making a bowl game wasn't where you set your bar. You want to be competing for the Sun Belt. And with 2 conference losses already and a very difficult conference schedule up ahead, I don't see that. And like I said, I think they're going to be lucky to make a bowl game this season. All right, so that'll do it for this week's edition of the College Football Stock Market. As always, we can't thank you guys enough for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed presenting it to you. Drop a like and a subscription. We'd really appreciate it. We make weekly college football content. Head over to our social medias, especially our TikTok. We do daily college football content over there. The College Football Award Show will be coming out later this week, as well as Blitz Boys. And then Saturday morning, our live stream to get you ready for week 9. Out of the Tunnel is going to be going on. So make sure you guys join us for that. We will see you guys in the next video.